Hare Krishna. So welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. Yesterday we did not have the Bhagavad Gita class. But today we are having the Bhagavatam class. So let us start with Mangalacharan prayers. I will share the screen. Okay. So we will recite the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanatimmirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granth-raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So we will recite the invocation verses for Srimad Bhagavatam. If possible, please unmute and repeat. So before that, this is Parikshit Maharaj and Shukdev Goswami and Sutta Goswami and the Rishis of Naimisharanya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskrityam.
Narayanam Namaskrityam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Tato Jayam Udirayet.
Tato Jayam Udirayet.
Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu.
Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Bhagavati Uttamah Shloki.
Bhagavati Uttamah
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Krishnaya Vasudevaya.
Krishnaya Vasudevaya.
Devaki Nandanaya Cha.
Devaki Nandanaya Cha.
Nandagopakumaraya.
Nandagopakumaraya.
Govindaya Namo Namaha.
Namo Namaha.
Thank you so much. So, last week we had covered the whole story of Bharata Maharaja. in a summary format, and we went over several chapters, mainly the story related chapters, which are 7, 8, 9, and 10. So 4 chapters are story, more or less. The 7th chapter describes how Bharata Maharaja renounced his kingdom, gave it to his sons, and went and performed Bhakti Yoga at near the at the ashram of Pulatsya Muni near the Gandaki river, and there he was very nicely performing his devotional service, especially Bhakti Yoga, and that is one point we will cover today in detail. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned how he was performing various yagyas and various sacrifices, but in his heart, his bhava or his consciousness was completely towards Sri Vasudeva, which is Lord Shri Krishna or Sri Narayana. So that is one aspect. He was performing very nicely his sadhana of bhakti. And then the next chapter deals with how he got entangled with the deer. So the next 8th chapter is about his entanglement with the baby deer that he sees, who took birth right in front of his eyes, and the deer's mother dies. So we will go into that whole aspect of how one gets entangled in the material world, which is the main point of this whole pastime, that how one gets entangled in the material world and what are the various aspects, what are the various causes. And we will see a very vivid description. And we will also see how one, even though one is so strongly on the path of Bhakti Yoga, still there is a possibility that one gets deviated. And then what happens to such a person? So that is what we will cover today mainly. The next chapter, the 3rd chapter, which is basically in this sequence 7th, 8th, then 9th. 9th chapter is the 3rd one. Then it starts with the description of it starts with the description of the 3rd life of Bharata Maharaja, which is that of Jad Bharat. So how he takes a vow in that life to not get entangled in the material world again, and he tries to keep himself as aloof as possible. And we will continue from there. We will go on from there. So like this, we will cover some very important aspects of this whole episode, which we covered in sort of quick summary last week. So if you want a full sort of a story line, you can review the video of previous week, but we will go over it in detail in the next few weeks as well. So the story starts with, first of all, that Bharata Maharaj was a wonderful ruler. He ruled for 10 million years. So in those times, the human beings had very, very long lives. And he was a perfect ruler, and he ruled for a very, very long time. 10 million years is the number given in the Bhagavad Purana. So here these are the same slides we showed last time, the 3 lives of King Bharat, the king and a sage. Then the next life is the deer, and finally the life of Jad Bharat. And then after some time, after ruling his kingdom, he gives up his kingdom to his descendants, and then goes to the Gandaki river, where these Shaligram Shilas are found. And we showed this picture of Shaligram Shilas in the Gandaki river that are found there. And that is where he started his full time. He was already doing Bhakti Yoga or devotional service when he was the king, but now it was a full-time job. So like a monk or an ascetic. So this is the picture which we will focus on, where he is spending all his time on the banks of the Gandaki river trying to do his devotional service. So one thing that we will, an important verse that we will go into today is that the name Bharat Varsha, what we call as India or something like that today, came from Bharata Maharaja, and that is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And at that time, there was no India, by the way. The whole planet was called Bharat Varsha. So today we have, it has, the planet has been chopped into many countries and regions, and only a small portion, India, is left, what we call as Bharat Varsh. But originally the name Bharat Varsh was for the whole planet. So we will look at the third verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll go back to sharing the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, we have this here, and we will go to library. We will go to Srimad Bhagavatam. 5th canto is where we are. And the 7th chapter is where King Bharat's activities begin. And this is verse number 3. So we will just read this verse. We won't go into the recitation part of it. I will do the reading. Now I need my glasses. So this verse says, Ajanabham namaitad varsham bharatam iti yat arabhya vyapadishyanti. So these verses of the 5th canto of the episode of Bharata Maharaja, they are not in any particular meter. These are more like prose verses. There are very small portions of Srimad Bhagavatam where the verses are in the prose form. So these are, not in any particular meter. So it says that this verse says, Ajanabham namaitad. This planet or this whole planet was known as Ajanabham, or based on the name of King Ajanabha. So Ajanabham. So it was known as Ajanabha Varsha. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport. So Ajanabha is the name of King Nabhi. And if you remember from the previous discussions of Srimad Bhagavatam of Lord Rishabhdev's teachings, Ajanabha or King Nabhi is the grandfather of Bharata Maharaj. He is the father of Lord Rishabhdev. So it was called Ajanabha based on the name of King Nabhi. Varsham Bharatam itiyat. Then it was changed. Arabhya Vyapadishanti. So it was called as Arabhya, means it was big. It began to be called based on the name of King Bharata. So Varsham Bharatam itiyat. So this whole Varsha, this whole planet was called as Bharat Varsha, beginning from the rule of King Bharat. So that is the translation of this verse. Formerly, this planet was known as Ajanabha Varsha, but since Mahārāja Bharat's reign, it has become known as Bharat Varsha. So you can see this directly. My point is, this is coming straight from Srimad Bhagavatam, that this whole planet was known as Bharat Varsha, and it was based on the name of King Bharata in the lineage of, or who was the eldest son of Lord Rishabhdev, as mentioned in 5th canto. So very direct reference is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, the next few verses that we will go over is verse numbers. We will go over 3 verses, 5, 6, and 7. So verse number 5. So then what happened was that when he was the king, he was ruling the world in a very, very, very nice way. and then he went to the ashram of Pulatsi Muni, etc., and he gave up his kingdom, and he began performing Bhakti Yoga. But he was also, when he was the king, he was also performing various sacrifices and various yagyas to the various demigods. So today, this next 10-15 minutes, I want to spend on this topic of how to worship the demigods or Devis and Devatas. This topic has come many times in Bhagavad Gita, especially in chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita and chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita. And we have said so many times that Srimad Bhagavatam has so many practical examples or studies, case studies about how the principles of Bhagavad Gita are applied by some of the topmost devotees of the Lord. And Bharata Maharaja is a topmost, one of the great devotees of Lord Vishnu. So here it is shown that the essence of what we will see is that even though it appeared externally that he was worshipping the demigods, in his consciousness, in his mind, he was perfectly aware that all the results of the sacrifice, everything that he is doing is ultimately going to Lord Vasudeva. So this is clearly being mentioned through these verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. And if at all one should worship or one needs to worship Devis and Devatas, that should be the consciousness in which one should perform his worship, that one should know fully well that who is the ultimate receiver or the benefactor. Aham hi sarva yajnanam bhoktaram bhokta cha prabhur eva cha, 9.24. That I am, Lord Krishna says, I am the receiver of all these sacrifices to any demigod that is performed by anyone. So the same exact point is being mentioned here, and Bharata Maharaj was doing it with that consciousness. So his consciousness was, whatever I'm doing is ultimately going to Lord Krishna. And that is how one should worship the demigods, if at all. Otherwise, the direct recommendation from Bhagavad Gita is, what is the recommendation from Bhagavad Gita? Would anybody like to mention? Whether to worship demigods or not?
Says worship Krishna.
Yes, why take the indirect process? Take the direct process of worshipping Lord Krishna directly. No need to go through the demigods, because you know that that is also going directly to Lord Krishna. So one can directly worship Lord Krishna. But many people ask this question, that how should we worship demigods? We have been worshipping the Devis, Devatas from from a long time, and we don't want to end that kind of a worship. The answer is that yes, one may continue that till their desire exists, but one should know that that worship is going to Lord Krishna, and one should do it with that mood that ultimately through them, they are just a means, but my worship is ultimately going to Lord Krishna. So that is the mood in which Bharata Maharaj is doing this worship. So let us see some of the verses here, these three verses specifically. 5.7.5, and we will just go through the translation and some of the keywords. So would somebody like to read the translation? Niru Mataji, would you be able to read this translation? I don't know if you can unmute. You just said something, so I assumed you can unmute. Anybody else?
I can go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead.
With great faith, King Bharata performed various kinds of sacrifice. He performed the sacrifices known as Agnihotra, Darsa, Punarmasa, Chaturmasa, Pasuyagnya, wherein a horse is sacrificed, and Somayagnya, wherein a kind of beverage is offered. Sometimes these sacrifices were performed completely and sometimes partially. In any case, in all the sacrifices, the regulations of Chaturhotra were strictly followed. In this way, Bharata Maharaja worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. So the important point to note here is that it is mentioned that Bharata Maharaj was performing various kinds of yagyas. Many of these names we may not have even heard. Agnihotra, Darsha, Purnamasa, Chaturmasya, Pashu Yagya, Soma Yagya. So many names are given. And so the point is that all these sacrifices he was performing. But the main point is that in this way, Mahārāja Bharata was worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the important line in the verse is this one. Ije cha bhagavantam yagya kratu rupam. So through the various forms of yagyas, yagya kratu rupam, he was doing these various forms of yagya, but that worship was ije cha bhagavantam, was going towards the Supreme Lord Bhagwan Shri Krishna. So here in this, obviously in this word, in this verse, Bhagavantam is the word that is used. The name of Lord Vasudeva or Krishna is not directly here, but it is coming in the next, few verses. So there is no doubt who this is towards, but this is towards Lord Shri Krishna, and it will be, we will see this in the very next verse. So the point of this verse is that even though there are all these elaborate sacrifices, yagyas going on, in his mind, he was very clear, or he was doing it with the consciousness that these are all going towards Lord Krishna. So we can see this directly from the example of Bharata Maharaj. So next verse, number 6. And here we will see, so would somebody else like to read the translation of this verse?
Can I read, Prabhuji?
Yes, please, Suman Mataji.
Okay. After performing the preliminaries of various sacrifices, Maharaja Bharata offered results in the name of religion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. In other words, he performed all the yajnas for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. Krishna Maharaja Bharata thought that since the demigods were different parts of Vasudeva's body, he controls those who are explained in the Vedic mantras. By thinking in this way, Maharaja Bharata was freed from all material contamination, such as attachment, lust, and greed. When the priests were about to offer the sacrificial ingredients into the fire, Maharaja Bharata expertly understood how the offering made to different demigods were simply an offering to the different limbs of the Lord. For instance, Indra is the arm of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Surya, the sun, is his eyes. Thus, Maharaja Bharata considered that the oblations offered to different demigods were actually offered unto the different limbs of Lord Vasudeva.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mataji. Thank you. So we can see here from this verse some of the key points that are being brought out. So first we'll see some of the key points that Mahārāja Bharata offered, as he was doing these sacrifices, all the results to Lord Vasudeva. And therefore, in other words, he performed all the yagyas for the satisfaction of Vasudeva or Krishna. Mahārāja Bharata thought that since the demigods were different parts of Vasudeva's body, He controls those who are explained in the Vedic mantras. So the demigods are nothing else but various parts of Lord Vasudeva's body. And so we worship if we are worshipping the demigods, the Devis and Devatas, we are ultimately worshipping Lord Vasudeva. So in Bhagavad Gita also we have seen that the various demigods are parts of Lord Krishna's body. Where have we seen that? Anybody knows? In Bhagavad Gita, which chapter? Where it is clearly mentioned that so many Devis and Devatas are part of Lord Krishna's body. Which chapter of Bhagavad Gita mentions this clearly?
In the 6th chapter.
6th chapter. Okay, I don't remember 6th chapter.
Number 10, 10th chapter.
Not again directly, not in 10th chapter either.
Oh, I think then 11th.
Yes, in the 11th chapter.
11th chapter, yeah.
Yes, in the universal form. In the 10th
Correct.
chapter, we see the various vibhutis of the Lord, the
Correct,
expansions of the Lord in the material world. Whereas in the universal form, we see a more direct representation of the demigods as the various limbs or various parts of the universal form's body, the Vishwarupa's body. And Vishwarupa is nothing but the expansion of Lord Krishna, which he shows to Arjuna, the universal form. So we will see here also that once we understand that the Devis and Devatas are nothing but the various limbs of the Lord's body, and if we are worshipping the various limbs of someone, we are worshipping that person directly. So that is being mentioned. And so let us see some parts of this verse. So one is Yagya Purushe Sarva Devata Linganam. Where is this? Yagya Purushe Sarva Devata Linganam. Yes, you'll see here this thing, Yagya Purushe. So Yagya Purusha is being mentioned here. Who is the Yagya Purusha? The main deity or the main receiver of all the yagyas is Lord Vasudeva. And Sarva Devata Linganam. Linganam means the various limbs. And all the devatas are the various limbs of the Lord's body, of Yagya Purushe, of that Yagya Purusha. The various limbs are the various devatas. Then we will see after a few more words, Paradevatayam. Where is that? Yes. Paradevatayam Bhagavati Vasudeva Eva Bhavayamana. So Paradevatayam, all the devatas. Bhagavati Vasudeva Eva Bhavayamana. So which means that Bharata Maharaja was worshipping Lord, the various demigods, knowing that Vasudeva, Bhagavati Vasudeva, you can see here, Bhagavati, the Supreme Lord Vasudeva, is the Paradevatayam, is the origin, or is the supreme most deity. And with that Bhavayamana, with that Bhava, with that consciousness, he was performing the various yagyas. So I don't want to do a full word by word, it will take a lot of time, but these are some of the key words in the verse that I wanted to highlight to show how Bharata Maharaja's consciousness was oriented. So even though it was externally he was worshipping the Devis and Devatas and doing various yagyas, the consciousness was that this is all for none other than Lord Vasudeva. Okay. So that is another verse. Then we will see in the next verse that once again, he was worshipping Lord Vasudeva. So in the 7th verse, so go to the 7th verse, and could somebody else read the translation of this verse? Nice and clear.
I can read, Prabhu.
Yes, Anita Mataji, please go ahead.
In this way, being purified by ritualistic sacrifices, The heart of Maharaja Bharata was completely uncontaminated. His devotional service unto Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, increased day after day. Lord Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, is the original personality of Godhead, manifested as a super soul, Paramatma, as well as the impersonal Brahman. Yogis meditate upon the localized Paramatma situated in the heart. Jnanis worship the impersonal Brahman as the supreme absolute truth, and devotees worship Vasudeva, the supreme personality of Godhead, whose transcendental body is described in the Shastras. His body is decorated with the Shrivatsa, the Kaustubha jewel, and a flower garland, and his hands hold a conch shell, disc, club, and lotus flower. Devotees like Narada always think of him within their hearts. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Very nice, Mataji. Thank you. So here we see that the various ways in which one worships the absolute truth is through Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. But the topmost devotees, and here there is a word in this verse, Vishuddha Sattvasya, that which is describing the consciousness of, or the position of Bharata Maharaja. Bharata Maharaja, whose existence was completely purified. But from many other discussions, we know that Vishuddha Sattva is the state of pure goodness, which is means of spiritual consciousness. There is no tinge. There is absolutely complete no presence of any material consciousness. That is known as Vishuddha Sattva. So that was the consciousness of Bharata Maharaj. And in that consciousness, he was able to worship, or he had advanced to the state of worshipping Lord Krishna in the Bhagawaan form, in the personal form, and the various upalakshana. These are some of the upalakshana, some of the symptoms that are given here. Upalakshana, which is the Shrivatsa mark, the Kaustubha jewel, the Vanamala or the garland, Aridhara, the disc and the conch shell, Gada Adi, the Gada means the club, etc. and other, Adi Bihi means other symbols like this. So that Purusha, that Supreme Lord who is recognized by all these various symbols, that was the one which was being worshipped by Bharata Maharaj, who was in Shuddha Sattva, who had no tinge of any material contamination. He was completely spiritually purified. So that is the, from the Sanskrit, we can see that what Srila Prabhupada has written here is directly being substantiated from the Srimad Bhagavatam, that one who is a pure devotee, even though he may worship the various demigods through various sacrifices, his consciousness is always towards Lord Shri Krishna. So that is the purpose of the discussion of these various verses. The last one that we will discuss here is verse number 12. So we will go to verse number 12. Chapter 7 and verse number 12. And what happened? What was the consequence of worshipping in this way? His bhakti kept increasing day by day. That is the result. When one performs bhakti yoga or sadhana bhakti, performs his sadhana in a mood of worshipping Lord Krishna directly without any result for any material benefits, then one's bhakti keeps progressing on a daily basis. So this is the consequence or the result of one's sadhana. So this is what is mentioned in this verse. And would somebody like to read this verse, the translation? I can call upon perhaps Meera Mataji. Did somebody say they wanted to read?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
The most exalted devotee Maharaja Bharata in this way engaged constantly in the devotional service of the Lord. Naturally, his love for Vasudeva Krishna increased more and more and melted in his heart. Consequently, he gradually lost all attachment for regulative duties. The hairs of his body stood on end, and all the ecstatic bodily symptoms were manifest. Tears flowed from his eyes so much so that he could not see anything. Thus, he constantly meditated on the reddish lotus feet of the Lord. All that time, his heart, which was like a lake, was filled with the water of ecstatic love. When his mind was immersed in that lake, he even got the regulative service to the Lord.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mataji. So here we see that as he was engaged in this way, he was constantly engaged in devotional service of the Lord. So that is mentioned. Then, because of this, naturally, his love for Lord Vasudeva or Krishna increased more and more and melted his heart. So that is the point I want to emphasize on. And here we will see directly a reference to Bhakti Yoga. So I'm trying to find that. Bhakti Yogena Paripluta. Yes. Bhakti Yogena Paripluta Parama Ahlad. So through this daily performance of Bhakti Yoga, Paripluta Parama Ahlad, which means that the Parama Ahlad means spiritual bliss, that spiritual happiness, the highest. Parama Ahlad. Ahlad means the happiness or the bliss or the spiritual consciousness was spreading throughout his body. Paripluta means was spreading. So he was basically glowing with spiritual consciousness through his practice of Bhakti Yoga. So by performing sincere Bhakti Yoga, by in this way, whatever one is doing, whether one is doing sacrifices to the demigods or anything, when one considers that all my activities are as an offering towards Lord Shri Krishna, then one's body becomes emanates this spiritual happiness, this spiritual bliss. Paripluta Param Ahlad. This is a very, very beautiful phrase. And through Bhakti Yoga, this was being manifested. So this sort of concludes our discussion on the 7th chapter. So we discussed how by performing these various yagyas and activities, ultimately Bharata Maharaj was performing Bhakti Yoga. That is the Bhakti Yoga towards Vasudeva, towards Shri Krishna. That was the essence of this whole discussion of last 30 minutes. So now we can go into the next chapter, the 8th chapter. But before that, are there any discussions, any comments, anything any devotees want to say? Okay, if not, then we will go into the 8th chapter. So let us go into the 8th chapter. And here we will see, so let me go back to my pictures, the slides that I had. So let me share those. And we will continue our story, and then we will stop at the place where we want to discuss. So Bharata Maharaj was performing all these sacrifices and was having a great time making progress in his bhakti. Then one day he sees a pregnant doe, a female deer, and it was drinking water on the bank of the river. And then she heard a big loud roar of a lion. And obviously being a deer, she got afraid and she immediately jumped across the river. And as soon as she landed, it was a very hard landing on the other side, the doe passed away. And right at that moment, the doe gave birth to this baby deer. So the baby deer was born, And as soon as it was born, it was orphaned. It lost its mother. And Bharat Maharaj, who was performing his devotional service, was seeing all this. So out of great compassion for the baby deer, Bharat Maharaj immediately went and rescued the baby deer. So, and then it rescued, but things did not stop there. Now here is where the story takes a twist. He should have rescued the deer, fine, and then he should have left the deer on, its own, give it a safe, place, and just leave it there like so many other deers and other animals are living. Ultimately, the Lord Krishna is the protector of all living entities. We think we are the protectors of our little family, our little people. Ultimately, the protector is Lord Krishna. Everybody is having a living. It's not that only people who we care for are able to stay alive. Everybody else is dying. That is not the case. Even those who have no family, no protectors, so to say, Lord Krishna is the protector, and they are all surviving. But Bharat Maharaj got entangled and got attached with the deer. It started as caretaker. First, it started as savior, saving for life, like a life-threatening situation, emergency 911 situation. Then it went to, okay, let me take little more care. So from 911 emergency, you go to the hospital ward. Then from hospital ward, it went to some nursing home. Okay, let me take some more care. It's a nice small deer. And then from nursing home, it came to the house and then became a permanent family member. So what started off just as an emergency call, it became a permanent attachment for Bharat Maharaj. So we will see in a very sort of short few verses. This is a very beautiful chapter, chapter 8 of Canto 5, where one can see how one gets entangled in the attachments. It starts off as very minute, something that, okay, it won't affect me. I will just do this and move on. I have to do this because it's my duty towards another living entity. We all say that devotees have to be very friendly, very caring, compassionate to other living entities. So they do your duty, but slowly it transforms from duty to very, very deep attachment. And this is a case study. A very wonderful, chapter 8 is a very wonderful case study of that transition from just a emergency duty towards another living entity out of compassion to very strong attachment like one's own child. So that whole transition is beautifully described in some verses throughout that sequence is sort of described in the 8th chapter. So please go through it. It's very eye-opening. We all have families. So it doesn't mean that we should stop treating our families as family members, as being, okay, you are some stranger. It's not like that, but slowly we have to develop a sense of detachment from all our attachments, including family members. It does not mean that we give up our family members, but we reduce the attachment, all the time being worried about them, what is happening, what are they doing, and use that time, that worry, for Krishna. Have I done my devotional service properly for Krishna today? What did I do in the name of devotional service? Did I do my chanting? Did I do my reading? Whatever ones, did I do my worship? Did I share Krishna's message with someone else? Anything, whatever services, whatever we have taken up as our activities in Bhakti Yoga, are we doing that? That is the worry, the healthy kind of worry that we should worry about, not that much about all our material attachments. So that is the understanding. So let us see. So here there is Bharat Maharaj rescuing this deer and becomes attached to this deer. We can see he's kissing the deer and he's caring for the deer so much. All the time he is with the deer. And we will see one very beautiful verse. This is what this picture is showing. Even though his mind, or externally he's supposed to be doing his sadhana, his mind is on the deer. It should be the other way around. That externally we are doing our daily duty, not sadhana, but duty. Mind should be on Krishna. Here, the duty is for Krishna. Whatever sacrifice, yajna that he is doing, mind is on attachments. What does Lord Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yuddha cha. That do your duty of fighting yuddha, but keep me in your mind. Mam anusmara. Remember me internally, externally do your duty. Here, externally he is trying to remember Krishna through the yajna, but his internally the mind is on the deer. So he completely got flipped. So we will see all these nice things in this chapter through 3-4 verses, not many, because we don't have much time. So we will, let me see what comes afterwards. Yeah, then he passes away. And, remembering the deer. So we will probably leave it at this verse, this deer or this place. So he passes away and he's remembering the deer. So the verse that we will cover, so I will go to the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the verse that we will start with is, we'll first go through 3 verses, 8, 9, and 10 of the 8th chapter. So now we are in 8th chapter of 5th canto. So if you have the Bhagavatam with you, you can go to that. We are in chapter 8 of canto 5. And we will go to 3 verses, 8, 9, and 10. Very nice verses, where we will again just go through the translations. Yes. How one begins to get entangled. So here it is described that how Bharata Maharaja became entangled with the deer and how it affected his sadhana. See, doing your duty is one thing, but if it comes at the cost of doing one's sadhana, then it is a problem. What does Lord Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? Mam anusmara yuddha cha, means and, not or. It's not do your duty, either do your duty or remember me. That's not what he says. He says do your duty and remember me, which means remembering Krishna should not be given up at any time. That is the primary foundation. Satatam kirtayanto ma. Always. Yatantascha dradhavrataha. Make a strong determination to do it all the time. Yatantascha. You must put an effort. Cha dradhavrataha. Very strong determination. It's not easy to remember Krishna all the time, but one should put determination of doing satatam kirtayanto ma. So there is no option to not remember Krishna at any moment. That is the highest bhakti. But here we will see clearly that he gave up his devotional practice, his sadhana, which is a very, 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 and the important part is Bharata Maharaj. This happened to Bharata Maharaj. Now, of course, this is so significant, this story, and that is the reason why it made it into the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the journal of the universe. Okay, and it only contains the most important case studies when the most extreme situations happen, isn't it? So when extreme things happen, then it finds itself in the news. That's what makes news. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the journal or the case study of the history of the whole universe. So the absolute most important or significant extreme cases are documented in Srimad Bhagavatam. So the point is that, yes, in many, many cases, if one is a very, very strong and fixed devotee, nothing will happen. But one should not assume that something can never happen, because we know of some extreme situations such as Bharat Maharaj where it has happened. Therefore, the point is not that one should give up bhakti, that bhakti doesn't work. It did not work in Bharat Maharaja's case. That is not the case. That's not the point. The point is you must perform bhakti, but never feel that, never feel too careful. You must always, or never feel too, what should I say? There is still always a slight chance that material attachments can come into your mind. So never let your guards down. One should
complacent. You mean complacent?
Complacent, yes, that's a very good word. One should never become complacent in his devotional service. Never. If it can happen to Bharat Maharaj, it can happen to all of us. That is the point to be taken away from this discussion. So, would Radhakanta Prabhu, would you like to kindly read the translation here?
Sure, Prabhu. Gradually, Maharaja Bharata became very affectionate toward the deer. He began to raise it and maintain it by giving it grass. He was always careful to protect it from the attacks of tigers and other animals. When it itched, he petted it, and in this way, he always tried to keep it in a comfortable condition. He sometimes kissed it out of love. Being attached to raising the deer, Maharaja Bharata forgot the rules and regulations for the advancement of spiritual life, and he gradually forgot to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After a few days, he forgot everything about his spiritual advancement. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. So this is how he got entangled. He began to raise it, maintain it, and protect it. He began to think, I am the protector. If I don't protect, then this deer is lost. He does not know that he can never protect the deer fully. One day or the other, every material living body has to come to an end, whether a tiger eats it, whether the deer falls from a cliff and dies, or whether the deer dies a natural death. Whatever may be the case, one can never protect the deer from death. So you may be able to protect the deer from a lion, but you cannot protect the deer from death. And trying to protect the deer, care for the deer, he gave up his own spiritual practice. That was the biggest mistake that he committed. So that is the thing that we see here in the case of Bharat Maharaj. It came, the entanglement came at the cost of his sadhana bhakti. Now, in the next verse, we will see the justification that he gave in his mind. It is not that Bharat Maharaj was a fool. He was very learned and he was practicing bhakti, but what justification? The mind is very, as Bhagavad Gita says, the mind can be the best friend, but it is also, or it can be the worst enemy. So what does it do as part of being the enemy? It gives you justification that, oh no, this is okay, that is okay, whatever, we have so many justifications in our own life. You see what all justifications you provide to do certain things which you shouldn't be doing. So this was in the next two verses, we will see the justification that Mahārāja Bharata gives to himself. So, and we will see what one can do about it, or what one should do about it. Okay. So, could somebody kindly read the translation here?
I'll read, Prabhuji.
Yes, Meera Mataji, go ahead. What happened? You got muted.
The great what?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The great King Maharaja Bharata began to think, alas, this helpless young deer, by the force of time, an agent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has now lost its relatives and friends and has taken shelter of me. It does not know anyone but me, as I have become its father, mother, brother, and relatives. This deer is thinking in this way, and it has full faith in me. It does not know anyone but me. Therefore, I should not be envious and think that for the deer, my own welfare will be destroyed. I should certainly raise, protect, gratify, and fondle it. When it has taken shelter with me, how can I neglect it? Even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, I realize that a helpless person who has taken shelter cannot be neglected. This would be a great fault. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah, go ahead and read the next one also. Let me show it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though one is in the renounced order, one who is advanced certainly feels compassion for suffering living entities. One should certainly neglect his own personal interests, although they may be very important to protect one who has surrendered.
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much. So what we will do, just so that we can see both these in the same screen, I'll just go to this view. So we are looking at 9 and 10. So here it is, 9 and 10. I will highlight these. So let us have little discussion. You all have studied Bhagavad Gita fairly deeply, nicely. And these are the justifications that Bharata Maharaj is giving. And he is even acknowledging that even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, he knows that. But still he is saying it's okay. This taking care of the deer is higher priority. So he is nicely able to give justifications. And then the rest of the story continues, how he, begins to, he lay down with it, walk with it, bathed with it, ate with it, all the things like he was treating the deer like his own child. But these two verses are the justification that he gave in his mind. Let us do some analysis on this justification. What are the flaws? What are the gaps or flaws in this justification? Where is this justification incorrect? Why should you not give this justification to yourself? Let us say that you found a little puppy on the road, and now you brought the puppy home because it seemed like it would die if you left it on the road. And you are doing very nice bhakti. Would this justification be all right in that situation? And what is wrong in this justification? Anyone likes to say? Yes.
Bharat Maharaj has forgotten the Sanatan Dharma, is just thinking about the Swadharma here, Prabhu.
Yes, that is correct. But which would you like to point out any particular sentence and say that is sort of use it more like a little bit of a more precise approach? Which word or sentence are you pointing to?
Even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, he realizes that it's actually disturbing his spiritual life.
Yes. So what you are, okay, very nice. So what you are saying is that he prioritized anything else. For example, taking care of the deer over and above his own spiritual life. Whereas the Sanatana Dharma is to do undivided devotional service. And now it is getting, at least it is getting divided at a minimum. And very soon we will see not only it gets divided, it gets eliminated. So he is forgetting his Sanatana Dharma. Very nice.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Hare Krishna, Mataji.
He is thinking that I have become its father, mother, brother, forgetting our universal father, mother, and everything, Lord Krishna.
Very nice point. That was the first point I also thought when I was reading this. We consider ourselves to be the protectors. Karta aham iti manyate. Whereas Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, what is that, 9.17, how it goes? Mata dhata pitamaham. Pita aham jagatasya mata dhata pitamaha. That I am the Pita aham jagatasya, the father of the whole jagat, mata dhata pitamaha. I am the mother, I am the dhata, the maintainer and pitamaha of the whole universe. Now there is a deer here. He doesn't know the deer, he just saw the deer in the forest, and suddenly he made himself the father, mother, all these things. Very nice.
Prabhuji, can I talk 1 minute?
Yeah, please.
I'm in California. My neighbor's daughter, when she is small, they have seen advertisement in paper that one dog met with accident and lost one leg. So if in 2 months, if nobody takes, it will be killed. So that girl was very compassionate, and she adopted the dog. It has become big. She has got so much attachment with the dog. It is a family member. So like Bharata Maharaja, she also saved one dog.
Yes.
Bharata Maharaja should have handed over to some other Muni instead of ruining his own spiritual life.
Sorry, what was the last sentence?
Bharata Maharaj should have handed over to somebody to take care of it instead of spoiling his own spiritual life. Yes.
So in that example, of course, I don't know whether your neighbor was doing bhakti yoga very seriously or not, but instead of doing some other thing, at least it was showing, they were showing compassion to this animal, which is a nice mode of goodness activity. So that is fine. The problem with Bharata Maharaja is what he had to give up. If your neighbors gave up some nonsense activity and went into mode of goodness, that is actually progress. But if you are doing spiritual activity, bhakti, and then you go back to mode of goodness, then that is not progress. That is, what is the opposite of progress? It is
Regress.
Regress. Thank you. So he regressed. So it depends on where you are currently. And in Bharata Maharaja's case, he was very, very advanced, but he regressed. So that is the other point, that he was, he considered himself to be the father, mother. Anything else? There are few more points, at least, that I could see and hear and read from various places. Anything else? Just to create some kind of a opportunity to think about it and to introspect and contemplate.
In Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says that Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Saranam Braja. So in this case, Bharat Maharaj is attached to deer, forgetting his dharma.
Yes. So instead of
Bhagavan Krishna.
Yes. Instead of giving up all the dharmas, he is taking up the dharma of a protector of the deer. Very nice. And then one more point, one devotee mentioned very nicely, is being said, this deer is thinking in this way that I have lost, there is no one but me, and all this way. There is no evidence that Bharata Maharaj is able to read the deer's mind. There is no such evidence. The point is, we think that they need our care. In many cases, when we are attached to others, at least in this particular situation where our attachment is because we think they need our care. That is our own imagination. Nowhere the deer is saying, I need your care. The deer, if you love it, if you fondle it, if you care for it, it will anyway come and kiss you, will sit in your lap. All those things are very natural for a deer to do. And Bharata Maharaj took it as, the deer needs my care. We make it mean more than what it is. We imagine things, and ultimately it is our attachment to the deer which is making us say that, oh, it needs our care. So how can I give it up? It is just a story, an imagination of our mind. It does not know anyone but me. All these points are our own imaginations. So there are more points. The deer has taken shelter with me. He actually went and provided shelter. The deer did not come and take shelter. So we increase our attachments, and then we give some external justifications that, oh, I have been given this responsibility. How can I now? I have to give up my existing responsibility of sadhana. And finally, the main point, one very, very important point, is of compassion. The point is that what is the highest activity of compassion? We have studied in Bhagavad Gita. Those who have studied Bhagavad Gita deeply, what is the highest activity of compassion?
The spiritual compassion, giving them the knowledge of the Lord.
Very nice. And where does that compassion start? Charity starts at
Home.
home. Very nice.
One's own self.
So 2 points. Charity starts at home. And the second point is the highest charity or the highest compassion is spiritual compassion. 2 points. And both those are being violated in this justification. First of all, Bharata Maharaj has no hope of giving spiritual compassion to the deer. He knows very well that in a deer's body, he cannot make spiritual progress, the deer. Deer cannot understand spirituality. So what spiritual knowledge you will give the deer? That is why human body is the best body, or is the only body in which one can make spiritual progress. So if he had adopted a small child and tried to give it spiritual knowledge, that would have been fine. That is why we all say that the duty of parents is to give spiritual education to their children. That's the highest priority. Then comes material education. The topmost education one parent must give is spiritual, because your child is human and you have sort of brought that child into your life. Just like Bharata Maharaj brought the deer into his life. So there is no hope of giving any spiritual charity to the deer. That is point number 1. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Prabhupada very clearly mentioned this. It is just bodily compassion, not spiritual compassion. Second thing, he is taking away his own spiritual compassion. He is not being compassionate to himself. He is harming himself because he is giving up his own spiritual progress. Charity starts at home. So in Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada says so many times, don't go and give Bhagavad Gita to others if you have not applied it on yourself. What is the point? First, you apply it on yourself. If you have little bit applied it on yourself, then you can go and give it to others. But first, the first person you should show compassion to is yourself. So read Bhagavad Gita yourself, apply it on yourself, then also go and give it to others. Here, both those things were not happening. Neither is he making his own spiritual progress, neither is he helping the deer make spiritual progress. Both those things are not happening, and that is the biggest flaw in this argument that this deer is under my protection. It is under the bodily protection. It is not under spiritual protection. This is a very, very important point to understand. Okay, so one point to discuss here is that, let me see my notes. Yeah. What should one do? Now, Bharata Maharaja, of course, is a case study. And in the Bhagavatam, one can also say that this whole thing was arranged by the Supreme Lord so that we can learn from the example of Bharata Maharaja. But in our case, in our own case, what should we do when or if we are facing such very hard or very impossible situations, what we call as dilemmas? The answer is that this, first of all, we must have a very, very good understanding of the shastra. The shastra is our guidebook. Whenever we cannot resolve, now, of course, we should pray to the Supreme Lord. So the Lord will help us. But from our side, yes, we should definitely pray to the Lord. But we should have a good understanding of Shastra so that Shastra will show us the way. It will provide us the guidance. And then we should also take guidance because our personal situation may be very complicated. Every situation is different. And the Shastra can give us general guidance, but specific guidance can be given by Guru and Sadhu. Guru and Sadhu means devotees who have more experience in Shastra are the sadhus, and Guru is one's direct Guru, one who has taken shelter of a Guru. So this is where one can get, clarifications from some senior devotee, from a mentor, from a guide, or from a Guru as to what to do in these kind of very difficult situations in our life. And this is sort of the recommended method of making progress in one's sadhana bhakti. So life will present very complicated situations. You can use Shastra sometimes to argue both ways. Therefore, you need very clear understanding of Shastra. Like in this case, like Bhagavad Gita, if we take it as a primary Shastra, it talks about compassion to others. It talks about how Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam, or what is that in 18.54? What is 18.54? How can you forget? Who remembers? Sammah sarva bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate pram. So brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kankshati sammah sarva bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. So sammah sarva bhuteshu, looking at all living entities equally. And there are other places in Bhagavad Gita, in the 12th chapter, 13th chapter, where the quality of daya and karuna are also mentioned, compassion and kindness towards other living entities. So that is one thing. Okay, if you see a dog or a puppy with a broken leg or a deer, baby deer, should we show daya, compassion? Or should we, perform our bhakti? Both things are mentioned in the Shastra. What do you do? So obviously one overrides the other. There are certain situations in which you may do one and the other. So a spiritual guide, mentor, guru is very, very helpful to help us in our spiritual progress. So that is an important sort of a point to keep in mind. The next one
One thing I want to add it that people generally quote the shastras in other way without the reference. As here also, if you quote this canto 5, 8, 10 in other way, it will damage the situation in negative sense. If you without reference, if you quote this
out of context, what is called
out of context, yeah.
Yes, very nice point. Therefore, not only understanding specific verses, which if taken out of context can mean completely opposite, that should not be one's scope of learning. The scope of learning should be the whole shastra, the entire shastra. There is a... Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Here I am reminded of Srila Prabhupada's life history when he was given a call to join national freedom struggle.
Very nice.
He took the other greatest opportunity of serving Lord Krishna.
Very nice point. Extremely nice point. Yes, let me elaborate a little bit on that. Thank you so much, Mataji, for bringing it up. And same point was presented to Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj. And let me tell you the source of this discussion. One time, Subhash Chandra Bose, all of you know who is Subhash Chandra Bose? He came to Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, who is the guru of Srila Prabhupada, and said, in your mutt, in your temple, you have these, brahmacharis. Give me those brahmacharis. I want to take them and fight. I will put guns in their hands and I will fight with them. I will put them in the service of motherland, Bharat Mata. And obviously Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, did not see it in that way. And he argued with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose that, do you believe in Bhagavad Gita? He said, yes, 100%. Then Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj said, then you must also believe in the process of the soul taking different bodies after death. That's a big part of Bhagavad Gita, right? Reincarnation. He said, yes, absolutely, I believe that. So he says that today you are a son of Bharat Mata. He said, yes. Therefore, you are fighting for India. He said, yes. He said, next life, let us say you are born as a Britisher. You are born as a Britisher. Will you fight for India or will you fight for Britain? And Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was silent. He did not have an answer. He said nobody had asked him that question ever before. He had no answer. So he said, you are trying to liberate the people, give them freedom from Britishers. Next life, you yourself may become the oppressor, which is a Britisher. I am trying to give everyone freedom, not from Britishers, but from this material world. Which one is more important? Freedom from Britain or freedom from samsara? And Netaji said, freedom from samsara is most important. So thank you. You are doing a great job. I don't need your men. Please continue doing what you are doing and bless me. And he left. Same argument. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do freedom fighting. Those who are in that propensity and that understanding, they can do that. It's an act of mode of goodness. In fact, you see in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, verse numbers 31 to 38, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, you should fight. Because if you fight, and even if you die in fighting the war, you will gain heavenly planets. You will attain martyrdom. You will become a martyr. Veer Gati. So, Veer Gati ko prapt hoge. So that is fine. That is a mode of goodness activity, but one should understand it is at a material level, just like doing charity, doing help, doing mode of goodness activities to others. but the spiritual activity is the highest. Srila Prabhupada also made this argument to Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj. When he met him the first time, when Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj said we should all, spend our time spreading the knowledge of Krishna, Srila Prabhupada told him that I don't want to spend time for Krishna. I will do that after India has been freed. Same argument Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj gave to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was immediately convinced. I mean, there's nothing you can say. Somebody as great as Subhash Chandra Bose had no response. There is basically no response to this. This is the highest activity. So, thank you, Mataji. Thank you for bringing that up. And therefore, one should have very clear knowledge of Shastra. What is mode of goodness activity? What is higher than mode of goodness? Chapter 14 in Bhagavad Gita clearly says one should try to go from the mode of ignorance to passion to goodness. But there is something beyond goodness, and one should strive for that, which is Shuddha Sattva. Not just Sattva Guna, but Shuddha Sattva, which is mode of transcendence. So, very nice point. Thank you. So, one last point I thought we'll have, we have 1 more minute. Let's read this 14th verse and we will conclude today's session. So who would like to read the translation of 13th verse?
May I?
Yes, please. Before you go ahead, I just want to explain. This is the verse I was mentioning when I showed this picture. Not this one, this one. That even though after he became so attached to the deer, the mind should be externally, you can take care of the deer, but the mind should be on Krishna. Here, he was trying to put his mind on Krishna by doing his daily sadhana, but the mind was always on the deer, which is like our case. When we are doing japa, we are thinking, oh, what email has come, or where is my child, or, what is the time? Is it time for my meeting? Whatever else, all the other thoughts come when we are trying to do our sadhana. That is the situation of Bharata Maharaj also. He was trying to do his sadhana, but his mind was occupied all the time by the deer. So we will see this verse, very nice verse, which clearly represents our own situation. At least it definitely represents my situation. So, yes, Ramakant Prabhu, please read this.
Maharaja Bharata was actually worshipping the Lord, or was engaged in some ritualistic ceremony.
Although, looks like he got frozen.
Although his activities were unfinished, he would still, at intervals,
his mind and heart would very satisfied, and he would bestow his blessings upon the deer, saying, "My dear calf, may you be happy in all respects."
Thank you. Prabhuji, you got dropped in the middle, so we lost some words. So, Suri Prabhu, maybe can you read it again? We'll read it again. No problem with reading it 2 times.
When Mahārāja Bharata was actually worshipping the Lord, or was engaged in some ritualistic ceremony, although his activities were unfinished, he would still, at intervals, get up and see where the deer was. In this way, he would look for it, and when he could see that the deer was comfortably situated, his mind and heart would be very satisfied, and he would bestow his blessings upon the deer, saying, "My dear calf, may you be happy in all respects."
Thank you, Prabhuji. So he was constantly caring to please the deer. May you be happy in all respects, or always worrying about the deer, even when performing devotional activities. The purpose of devotional activities is to please Lord Krishna. That may Lord Krishna, may you be happy with my worship, with my sadhana, with my bhakti. That should be the prayer. Here, it is completely opposite. He is saying, my dear deer or my dear calf, may you be happy in all respects. So he is trying to please the senses of the deer rather than pleasing the senses of the Lord. So we can see how complete 180-degree flip happens in the case of Bharata Maharaj. So we will stop here for today and we will resume next time. Some very very beautiful verses are coming up. How finally Bharata Maharaj dies. Like this, we remain entangled. And very nicely, it has been described how death shows up. Knock, knock. So death knocks. And the example that is given is that of a snake entering the hole of a mouse. The mouse builds nice holes and thinks, I will live comfortably forever after in this little hole. And one day, who arrives at the hole? A snake. So just like that, yes, just like that, we make all wonderful plans and one day death arrives. So we will see that very sort of it's little heavy. And then we will see how Bharata Maharaj takes the life of a deer and what he thinks in the life of a deer. What is his thought? Because it's a special deer. He's not an ordinary deer. That deer can remember his past life and it can have the same consciousness as a human being. It can think like a human being. So this deer is special. Not that young baby deer was not special, but the next life of Bharata Maharaj as a deer will be a special deer. And we will see what the deer is thinking and how the deer is saying, what an idiot I was, such a fool. He will say, he will call himself such a biggest fool of the whole world, he will call. And he will say, now I am trapped in this body of deer. I have to pass extra time in the body of a deer. So like that, he will repent. And then third life he gets of Jad Bharat. And then he makes a vow. This life, I'm not going to do anything stupid. And we will continue like that. We will go. So we are going verse by verse into, not verse by verse, but taking some important, nice verses and seeing directly from Srimad Bhagavatam, the words from Bhagavatam, and trying to learn and trying to apply it in our life. So that is the purpose. Any final discussions or questions or comments?
It's nice, Prabhuji.
Yes, go ahead.
It's nice.
Okay. Yes, Bhagavatam is always nice. All right. If nothing, then thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. We will see you next weekend in Bhagavad Gita class, Srimad Bhagavatam class, etc. Thank you so much. Granth-Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Today we missed Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, we had to cancel yesterday. No, we will resume next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.